Nestled on the western edge of the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal's story is a saga of resilience, discovery, and distinct identity. Unlike the narratives of conquest and amalgamation that define much of European history, Portugal's tale is one of a steadfast nation, holding its ground against the sands of time and the ambitions of empires. The single mainland neighbor of Portugal is Spain, a much larger country with a significant history. Centuries ago, Spain was one of the biggest powers of the world, expanding itself in the New World and in Asia, having large overseas colonies guarded by its incredible armies and navies. Considering their former power and having a smaller neighbor cornered at the Atlantic coast, one may wonder why Portugal wasn't conquered by Spain. That said, the narrative in Spain about why does Portugal exist and we don't have an Iberian Union goes like this. Portugal was a county of the Kingdom of Galicia from 868, with no particular power or privilege and no particular national identity. It was a border region like Castile was, and of a similar age. At one point, King Ferdinand of Castile, which was newly independent and newly turned into a kingdom. And Leon had this little problem. His French wife's two brothers were conspiring against him to get power from him, being the practical medieval king he was, and living before the whole national unity was a concept. He solved the issue by severing Galicia from his realm and severing a really large county within Galicia, with most of the fertile areas. That is, today's Portugal. He gave the kingdom to one of the brothers and the county to the other. Since by design the county was stronger than the kingdom but subordinate to it, the two brothers ended up fighting each other and left Ferdinand alone, which was kind of the idea. In those struggles, the guy with the county eventually separated from Gallus and, after some time of confusion for everybody in which the ruler of Portugal called himself Infante, or Prince, because he wasn't sure of what he was. So Portugal became a kingdom, one of the three kingdoms who had borderland with the Arabs at that time. By the end of the Middle Ages, there were three kingdoms left in Iberia: Castile, Portugal, and Aragon. Castile and Portugal were mostly allies, and they had a lot of land south of them to expand on, so there was no reason to fight or make any serious attempt to take each other's territories. During the War of Castilian Succession, Portugal supported Johanna, wife of King Alfonso V of Portugal, while Aragon supported Isabel, wife of Ferdinand and the future queen of Ferdinand II of Aragon. They made various disastrous attempts at joining in dynastic union but were wildly unlucky, and heirs had a bad tendency to being unalive. There was one time in which the crown of Portugal was going to be inherited by the Prince of Castile, and both kingdoms agreed on that. But the King of Castile destroyed everything by ignoring the terms of inheritance and trying to take Portugal himself, which made both Portugal and a big chunk of the Castilian nobility very unhappy. Eventually, when they were finally about to manage to unite under Princess Juana of Avis, the King of Aragon and Princess Isabella gave a coup on the throne of Castile, took the throne away from Juana of Avis, and created a dynastic union between Castile and Aragon. They were still three kingdoms separated to each other, but Isabella and Ferdinand took steps to unify Castile and Aragon as much as possible, creating shared institutions like the Inquisition and the Holy Brotherhood, for example. Portugal, Castile, and Aragon were allies in the Reconquista, in which they reconquered land from the Muslim Moors, expanding southward on the Iberian Peninsula. Portugal's reconquest was fully achieved by 1249, while Castile finished its reconquest in 1492. Following Christopher Columbus's first Spanish voyage to the Caribbean in 1492, both states began acquiring territory in the New World as a result of the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas. Later on, Portugal, Aragon, and Castile would all be ruled by the same monarch, personal union under the Hibernian crown. Said monarchs, the Augsburg, made no significant attempt at unifying their kingdoms at all, because why would they? As far as they got the rep and the taxes, right? So even though the three of them were independent kingdoms sharing a monarch, technically, Castile and Aragon shared more institutions and were united more tightly to each other, while Portugal was pretty much on its own. At this point on history, the ideas of monarchs was to create an empire, or better said, to have as many kingdoms and territories under their name and titles behind their name, not necessarily to unite or create what we would understand as a nation. So the kings cared about being kings of Portugal and of Castile and of Aragon, not particularly about assimilating any of them to any of the others. After the Spanish victory in the War of Portuguese Succession, Philip of Spain was crowned king in 1581, starting a personal union between the two nations known as the Iberian Union. This resulted in a decline of the Portuguese Empire during the period of union. The Iberian Union lasted for almost 60 years until 1640, when the Portuguese Restoration War was initiated against Spain. and Portugal re-established the Portuguese dynasty under the Braganza. Under Philip IV, Portugal broke out of the crown and got itself another king. At that point, and under Carlos II, Spain was in no condition to invade anyone, nor had a decent ruler to do so. Plus, a reduction in sea borders to watch over was actually convenient. After the dissolution of the Hispanic monarchy, at the death of Carlos II, modern Spain was formed and given a Bourbon ruler that pretty much turned it into an extension of France's interests and a burning ball of discontent and inner turmoil. During the wars of the 18th century, which were often fought by the major powers to maintain the European balance of power, Spain and Portugal usually found themselves on opposite sides. Courtesy of their long-standing alliance, the Portuguese aligned themselves with Great Britain, while Spain, through the Bourbon family compact, allied themselves with France. In 1762, during the 7 Years' War, Spain launched an unsuccessful invasion of Portugal. In 1777, a conflict arose between the two states over the borders of their possessions in South America. The War of the Oranges occurred in 1801, during which Spanish forces influenced by France attacked and invaded Portugal. This conflict was a precursor to the Peninsular Wars and led to the Treaty of Badajoz, resulting in the loss of Portuguese territory, particularly Olivenza, and ultimately setting the stage for the complete invasion of the Iberian Peninsula by Spanish and French forces in 1807. The King of Spain and his French allies successfully invaded Portugal. However, the French decided to take over both countries, overthrowing the King of Spain and forcing the Portuguese royal family to flee to the Portuguese colony of Brazil. Spain and Portugal subsequently became allies for the first time in centuries, and together with the British Army they managed to expel the French by 1813 after a prolonged conflict known as the Peninsular War. The French rules changed all the internal, very federal organization of the Spanish territory that functioned pretty much as a decentralized version of the USA, and tried to impose a model of centralized French absolutism. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well, not in Iberia nor in the colonies. Plus, with some honorable exceptions, the Spanish narrative considers those kings a parade of tyrants and idiots. Anyhow, Portugal had been having its own problems since it broke out of the Iberian crown, protecting its borders. By the time all that was over, we were already at a time in history in which invading someone for no reason wasn't regarded kindly. The historiography of the 19th century placed a lot of emphasis on the Portuguese-English treaty and essentially said that Portugal owned its independence to England, which is not totally true. Portugal is not weak. They don't give Portugal nearly enough credit, and the common idea that they stayed independent only because England helped them is insulting. Spain's best practical route to conquer Portugal by force would have been a sea invasion via its western coast. This would have required naval dominance over Portugal and England and a route past either North Africa or France to get there in the first place. If you're interested in seeing more videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell button to be notified when a new video is uploaded.